So not only is the very structure of the way in which we attain knowledge something which guarantees that what we focus on is not what we are, but always must ignore everything else that goes into what we are. But the very nature of consciousness is something that's an activity that takes place over time, guarantees us that we will never, as Nietzsche puts it, have sufficient time to really know ourselves. Here he's exploding the myth of direct contact. The myth goes like this. It's so common sense that I don't even need to explain it to you. Right now, you are all listening to me, and therefore thinking through my speaking to you that I'm a conscious being. But you're making it as an inference. You don't have a direct experience of my conscious states. You have direct experience of your conscious states. There's nothing in between you and your consciousness. That's how the myth goes. And since, therefore, you're the only one who is direct consciousness of your consciousness, then it follows that you are best aware, that you are the expert on who you are and what's going on with you right now. I can guess these things, make halfway decent inductive inferences, but I can never have that direct contact that's necessary for absolute knowledge of the self. I can only do that for myself. That's the myth. What Nietzsche is going to show is, in fact, we have no direct contact with our actual conscious states. That by the time we become aware of our consciousness and what is going on to produce the succeeding states of consciousness, it's already too late. We're always a step behind. He uses the illustration of suddenly realizing that the clock is tolling. In our campus, we have a church, a chapel, and that chapel has a bell, and it chimes or tolls the time hourly. And so, of course, you could be on campus and it's 12 noon, and when it strikes 12, then what happens is the bell will toll 12 times. But you don't know that it's approaching. And so what happens many times is I'm walking on campus, I forgot my watch, all of a sudden I realize the bell is tolling. The problem is it took time for me to be aware of that because I wasn't waiting for it, I wasn't expecting it. And so by the time I realize that the clock is tolling, now it's useless to me because I don't know how many beats or tolls I didn't hear. I have to try to remember what I wasn't aware of. I came too late to use it as an indicator of actually what time it is. And what he's arguing is that's the nature of consciousness in general because of the nature of time. So what do we mean by this? Well, think about this. I want to be aware of myself, but what am I? I'm an activity. I am my conscious experience. I'm this constant flow of thought and feeling and acting and desiring and striving, all of these like a stream. And the only part of that stream that exists at any moment is that present moment, because the past is gone and therefore no longer exists, as Schopenhauer showed us, and the future isn't there yet. And so the only self that could possibly exist and that I could possibly come in contact with is the present self, the self of the present moment. But how long does the actual present moment last? It can't last at all, can it? As we said, if the present moment had a duration, then it would take some time to get through it. And at some middle point of that time, the present would have a past and it would have a future. But then it wouldn't be present anymore. The present can't have any duration. And so therefore the present self that I could possibly experience would last no time at all. But this is the problem. The problem is any experience, for it to register in your mind at all, requires a certain amount of duration. Otherwise, you wouldn't pick it up at all. You wouldn't perceive it at all. This is why, for example, if a song was sung too quickly, you wouldn't be able to recognize it. If a word had no duration, even a one-syllable word like Bob requires some duration to it for you to even hear it. So if something happens with so little duration that you can't pick it up, then it can't be a part of your experience. You can't be in contact with it. But here's the problem. Our experience present must have duration. By the time, therefore, you recognize the word Bob, some of the sound is gone already, doesn't it? And some of the sound is yet to come. And what you're recognizing, therefore, is a past. It's already gone. It's already too late. But the only self that exists that you could be in contact with is in the present. By the time you're aware of it, though, it's already in the past. And so therefore it follows that the self we experience is of a past self. But you might say, well, yeah, but I can remember it, right? Because I experienced it, and so I can remember it. But we said that you can't experience that which has no duration. So what you're trying to remember is something you don't experience until it's too late. And so therefore you can't have a memory of it. I cannot remember that which I never was conscious of in the first place. This is why general anesthetic works. You don't feel pain not because your body didn't register the pain. It's precisely because you don't remember it. And why don't you remember it? Because you were asleep. It's like the old joke. How did you sleep last night, Troy? I don't know. I was asleep. I don't remember it. So this is the point, is that by the time consciousness reaches a threshold that we are aware of the state that we're in, the states that caused it are gone. And so we're like that person who's trying to count the number of tolls on the clock, but only becoming aware of it when some of them have already been told. And therefore they cannot tell what time it is by counting the remaining beats. They don't know how many have already been told off. This is our problem then. Not only do we not remember that which causes the experienced present state, because we can't even experience it, but we often do have a memory, but that memory can't be caused by what was actually taking place, because we never had experience of it. So it follows that we are constantly rationalizing ourselves into existence in the very experience, so-called, of direct contact with our experience. We are necessarily strangers to ourselves, and as strangers, manufacturing motives and intents and reasons for why we did what we did and why we're experiencing the feelings we're experiencing now, or thinking the thoughts we're thinking now. And they must be false, because they must be based on that which we had no experience of and could never experience, as is the nature of the case of the present versus our experience of the so-called present. So it's kind of like trying to hear the beginning of a rainstorm. You know how many of you have been outside when it's sunny out, and then all of a sudden the clouds come, and you look, oh, it's going to rain, and then slowly but surely the rain starts. And it feels, and when do you know the rain has started? Say you're inside so you can't feel the raindrops. Well, when you hear the rain, and when you see the rain. But can you see the individual raindrops, the first drops? Of course not. They're too small. You can't hear each individual drop because, again, they're so small that it wouldn't register in your auditory system. And so what does this mean? This means that when you finally hear the drops, it's only because a lot of them are falling at once. And that means that when you finally register that it started raining, it's already too late to say that it started. It's already been. That's consciousness. I think I have direct consciousness because I have this direct experience. But what I experience is always at the threshold and never at the beginning. and therefore always too late for what I was striving to grasp. Who of us has sufficient time? We don't. We're always like the person coming in the middle of the clock tolling. We cannot use our experience, therefore, to judge the time, to judge, therefore, the self, whose very nature is of an activity, of a constantly changing activity that by the time we become aware of it is already gone. It's already too late. Which of us has sufficient time? Now, why is this important? Again, moral action, truly admirable, virtuous action, requires that I am in control of my action. But can I be in control of that of which I am not aware? No. It's an obvious truth that if I cannot be aware of it, I cannot control of it. That's why we say knowledge is the first step. Knowing that you're sick is the first step toward healing. But if you don't know it, you can't control it. It controls you. But what we've just seen is the very essence and core and source of our conscious decisions must necessarily be on the periphery of our consciousness. At the beginning, in the frame, the before, the very things we cannot be aware of, if consciousness is to give us awareness at all. And so therefore we can never know whether we are in control. And in fact, if our conscious states are caused by our previous conscious states, it follows that the causes of our actions are always the things we can never be aware of. And therefore, we cannot control our actions. And therefore, what we do cannot either be praised or blamed. The very essence of the traditional morality collapses when free will collapses. And so therefore, our next step is to show not only how self-knowledge is impossible, but that free will itself is a chimera. It is a contradiction, and therefore is provably something we cannot have. Not only that we do not have, but we cannot have. Our supposed freedom is itself a myth.